The dust hung in the air like a burial shroud as Eliza Thornton stood on the porch of the general store, her hands trembling despite the fierce grip she maintained on the wooden railing, watching the rider approach from the east with a terror that made her bones feel like water. She had been free for exactly 4 months and 17 days, each one a precious gift she had counted, like a miser hoarding gold coins, and now she could see the familiar black mare and the straight-backed figure of Randolph Whitmore cutting through the shimmering heat waves of the Arizona desert. The year was 1877, and the town of Redemption Creek sat nestled between red rock formations and endless sky, a place where Eliza had dared to believe she might finally build a life that belonged to her alone. She had worked as a seamstress here, taking in mending and creating simple dresses for the women who lived in this dusty settlement of perhaps 200 souls. Her fingers, once ruined by harsh lye soap and endless scrubbing during her years of servitude in Whitmore's grand house in San Francisco, had begun to heal in the dry desert air. The rider drew closer, and there was no mistaking him now. Randolph Whitmore sat tall in his saddle, his silver hair gleaming beneath his black hat, his face as hard and unyielding as granite. He had always carried himself like royalty, like someone who believed the world owed him obedience simply because he demanded it. Eliza had spent 6 years under his roof, 6 years that had stolen her youth and nearly broken her spirit. She had been purchased from an orphanage when she was 12, brought west as an indentured servant with papers that promised her freedom at 18. But 18 had come and gone, and then 19 and 20, and Whitmore had simply smiled his cold smile and told her she still owed him for room and board, for the clothes on her back, for the very air she breathed. She had escaped on a cold February night, slipping out through the kitchen door while the household slept, taking nothing but the worn dress she wore and $20 she had stolen from the household accounts. It was theft, yes, but she had earned that money 100 times over with her labor. She had made her way south and east, traveling by stagecoach and wagon, always looking over her shoulder, until she had arrived in Redemption Creek with its promise of anonymity and a fresh start. Now that promise was turning to ash in her mouth. Whitmore dismounted in front of the general store with practiced grace, his boots raising small clouds of dust as they hit the ground. His eyes found her immediately, and his lips curved into a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "Eliza," he said, his voice carrying easily in the still afternoon air, "I have been searching for you for quite some time." She could not speak. Her throat had closed up entirely, and her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was 24 years old, and in that moment she felt 12 again, small and powerless and utterly alone. "You left rather abruptly," Whitmore continued, climbing the steps to the porch with measured movements, "without settling your debts, without fulfilling your obligations. That was very disappointing, Eliza. I treated you well, gave you a home, and this is how you repay my generosity?" "I owed you nothing," she managed to whisper, though her voice shook. "I worked for 6 years past my contract." "Your contract specified that you would work until your debts were paid," Whitmore said smoothly. "And I have kept meticulous records of every expense. You still owe me 3 years of service by my calculation. And now you have added theft to your crimes. $20, Eliza, that is a serious matter." He reached out as if to take her arm, and she jerked backward, nearly stumbling. Several townspeople had stopped to watch the confrontation, their faces curious but not particularly concerned. Why would they be? They did not know her story. To them, she was just a quiet woman who kept to herself. And Whitmore looked every inch the respectable gentleman in his fine black suit and polished boots. "I will not go back," she said, and was surprised by the firmness in her voice despite her terror. "I am free." "You are nothing of the sort," Whitmore replied, and now there was steel beneath the smooth tone. "You are a thief and a runaway, and I have every legal right to take you back to San Francisco to face the consequences of your actions. Now come along quietly, and I will be lenient. Make a scene, and I promise you will regret it." He moved toward her again, and she felt the wooden railing press against her back as she retreated. There was nowhere to go. She could run, but he would catch her. She could scream, but who would help her? The law was on his side, or at least he claimed it was, and she had no papers, no proof of anything except his word against hers. The lady said she is free. The voice came from behind Whitmore, deep and calm, with a slight drawl that marked the speaker as a man born to the Western Territories. Eliza looked past her former owner and felt something shift in her chest. The man who had spoken stood at the base of the porch steps, one boot resting on the lowest riser, his thumbs hooked casually in his gun belt. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar beneath his worn brown hat. His eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue like storm clouds over the desert, and they were fixed on Whitmore with an expression that was polite but utterly unyielding. "This is a private matter," Whitmore said, turning to face the newcomer with obvious irritation. "I suggest you move along." "Cannot do that," the man replied. He moved up the steps with an easy grace that reminded Eliza of a mountain cat, all coiled strength and quiet confidence. "I heard the lady say she would not go with you. I heard her say she is free. Seems to me that settles the matter." "And who exactly are you?" Whitmore demanded. "Name is Cole Bennett," the man said. "I work the Triple Bar Ranch about 10 miles north of here. And I know that slavery was abolished more than a decade ago, which means nobody in this territory owns anybody else." "I never said anything about slavery," Whitmore snapped. "This woman is an indentured servant who broke her contract and stole from me. I have every right to take her back to face justice." Cole Bennett stepped between them, positioning himself so that Whitmore would have to go through him to reach Eliza. The movement was casual, almost lazy, but there was nothing casual about the way his hand rested near the gun on his hip. "You have papers proving these claims?" Cole asked. Whitmore's jaw tightened. "The papers are in San Francisco naturally, but I assure you everything is perfectly legal." "Then I suggest you go back to San Francisco and fetch those papers," Cole said, "and maybe bring along a sheriff or a judge who can verify your claims. Until then, the lady stays here, free." The last word hung in the air like a challenge. Eliza could scarcely breathe. She did not know this man, had never seen him before in her life, yet here he was, standing between her and a nightmare she had thought would haunt her forever. Whitmore's face had gone red. "You are making a very serious mistake, young man. When I return with the proper authorities, you will find yourself facing charges of obstruction and possibly aiding a fugitive." "I will face whatever comes," Cole said calmly. "But until you can prove your claims with actual legal documents, she stays here, free." There was that word again. Free. Eliza felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in front of Whitmore. She would not give him that satisfaction. For a long moment, the two men faced each other, and Eliza could feel the tension crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. Then Whitmore took a step back, smoothing his jacket with hands that shook slightly with suppressed rage. "Very well," he said tightly. "I will return with the proper documentation, and when I do, both of you will learn that I am not a man to be trifled with." He descended the steps and mounted his horse with jerky movements that betrayed his anger. Before riding away, he looked up at Eliza one last time, and the promise in his eyes made her blood run cold. "I will be back, Eliza. You can run, but you cannot hide forever." Then he wheeled his horse around and rode out of town at a gallop, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. Eliza's legs gave out and she would have fallen if Cole Bennett had not caught her arm, steadying her with a firm but gentle grip. "Easy now," he said quietly. "You're safe. I have got you." She looked up at him, this stranger who had just changed everything, and found herself unable to form words. He had kind eyes, she realized. Kind eyes in a weathered face that spoke of long days under the sun and hard work honestly done. "Thank you," she finally managed. "I do not know why you did that, but thank you." "Could not stand by and watch," he said simply. He released her arm once he was certain she was steady, stepping back to give her space. Nobody should be dragged off against their will, And despite what that fellow claimed, you did not look like someone who owed him anything except maybe a kick in the teeth. A startled laugh escaped her, half sob and half genuine amusement. He will come back, she said, the fear creeping back in. He meant what he said. He will bring papers, real or forged, and he will take me away. Cole was quiet for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. Then I suppose we need to make sure his papers do not mean anything, he said. How long were you supposed to serve under this contract of his? Until I was 18, she said. But I am 24 now. I gave him 6 extra years and it was never enough. He kept claiming I owed him more, that I had to work off debts I never agreed to. That is not indentured servitude, Cole said flatly. That is just slavery with extra steps. And it is illegal as hell, pardon my language. But I did steal $20 from him, Eliza admitted. That part is true. Did you now? Cole scratched his jaw, considering. Well, seems to me that if you worked 6 years past your contract, you earned that $20 many times over. That is not theft. That is collecting wages owed. The law might not see it that way. Maybe not, Cole agreed. But I know the territorial judge, and he is a fair man. If we can get your story to him before Whitmore comes back, we might be able to head this whole thing off, get you some legal protection. Why are you helping me? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. Cole looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression made her heart skip. My mother was an indentured servant, he said quietly. She was brought over from Ireland when she was 15, promised her freedom after 7 years. She died when I was 10, still serving out a contract that kept getting extended for one reason or another. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone in the same situation, I would. So no, I do not know you. But I know what it is like to watch someone you love be treated like property. And I will be damned if I let that happen to anyone else if I can stop it. Eliza felt something crack open in her chest, some wall she had built around her heart to keep out hope and trust, and all the dangerous emotions that had only ever brought her pain. This man, this stranger, was risking himself for her based on principle alone, and she did not know what to do with that gift. I do not have money to pay a lawyer, she said. Did not ask you for any, Cole replied. Now, where are you staying? I have a room above the milliner's shop, she said. Mrs. Henshaw rents it to me in exchange for help with her sewing. Good. You should go there now, stay inside until we figure out what to do next. Is there anyone in town you trust? Anyone who can vouch for you? Eliza thought about that. She had kept to herself mostly, wary of forming attachments that might be torn away if she had to run again. But there were a few people who had been kind to her, and too. Mrs. Henshaw, she said slowly, and Mr. Patterson at the general store. I have done mending for his family, and Dr. Brennan's wife sometimes hires me to alter her dresses. That is a start, Cole said. Respectable folks who can testify to your character, that will help. He tipped his hat to her. I need to ride out to the ranch and talk to my boss about getting some time off. Then I am going to send a telegram to Judge Hawkins in Tucson and see if we can get him to come out here. In the meantime, you sit tight and try not to worry. Try not to worry, she repeated, and felt that startled laugh try to escape again. That is like telling the sun not to rise. He smiled at that, a slow curve of his lips that transformed his serious face into something warmer. Fair point, but at least know you're not facing this alone anymore, all right? She nodded, not trusting her voice. He gave her a brief nod in return and then headed down the steps, mounting a buckskin horse that had been waiting patiently tied to the hitching post. As he rode away, Eliza remained on the porch, watching until he disappeared down the dusty main street of Redemption Creek. Something had shifted in the world. She could feel it like the change in air pressure before a storm. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt the smallest flutter of something that might have been hope. The next 3 days passed in a strange suspension of time. Eliza went about her work, taking in the mending and alterations that kept her fed and housed, but her mind was always half elsewhere, waiting for either Whitmore's return or some word from Cole Bennett. She saw the cowboy twice more during those days. Once when he came by to tell her he had sent the telegram and was waiting for a response, and once when he happened to be in the general store at the same time she was picking up thread. That second meeting had been brief but oddly significant. They had exchanged greetings and he had asked how she was holding up. She had admitted that she was not sleeping well, jumping at every sound. He had looked at her with those storm cloud eyes and said something that had stuck with her. "You have been running and hiding for so long, you have forgotten how to stand still and fight, but you are not alone in this fight. Remember that." Then he had tipped his hat and left, and she had stood there in the general store holding her spool of thread and feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. On the fourth day, Cole came by the milliner's shop in the early evening when the sun was painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Eliza was sitting by the window working on a dress hem by the fading light when she saw him approach. Her heart did an odd little skip, and she told herself firmly that it was just nervousness about her situation, nothing more. "Mrs." Henshaw answered his knock and called up the stairs for Eliza. "That Bennett boy is here to see you, dear." Eliza set aside her sewing and descended the narrow staircase, acutely aware that her hair was probably escaping its pins, and her dress was rumpled from a long day of work. Cole stood in the milliner's small front room, hat in his hands, looking somehow larger than life in the confined space. "Got news," he said without preamble. "Judge Hawkins is going to be in town day after tomorrow. He agreed to hear your case." Relief flooded through her so intensely that she felt dizzy. "Truly?" "Truly. I explained the situation in my telegram, and he is interested in hearing your side of things, but we need to prepare. He's going to want details, dates, names, specific incidents, anything you can remember that proves Whitmore kept you past your contract illegally." "I remember everything," Eliza said quietly. "I tried to forget, but I remember every single day." Cole's expression softened. "I am sorry you had to go through that. But now those memories are going to help set you free for good. Can you write it all down? Everything you remember?" "Yes, I can write." She had taught herself during stolen moments in Whitmore's house, practicing letters by candlelight when the rest of the household slept. It was one of the few skills she had acquired that felt truly hers. "Good. Then we will get your statement written up, and I will ask Mrs. Henshaw and the others to write character references. When Whitmore shows up with whatever papers he has, we will be ready for him." Mrs. Henshaw, who had been listening with barely concealed interest, spoke up. "That man who was here before? He is the one who had you working for him?" "Yes, ma'am," Eliza said softly. The older woman's face hardened. "I thought there was something off about him. Too smooth, if you know what I mean. Like a snake oil salesman. You just let me know what you need from me, child. I will be happy to tell any judge what kind of worker you are. Honest and diligent, never complaining, always doing more than what's asked." "Thank you," Eliza said, and meant it with her whole heart. Cole settled his hat back on his head. "I will come by tomorrow morning and we can work on getting everything organized. Try to get some rest tonight if you can." After he left, Eliza went back upstairs and lit her lamp, pulling out a precious sheet of paper and her pen. Then she began to write, letting the memories she had tried so hard to suppress flow out through her fingers onto the page. She wrote about being 12 years old and arriving at Whitmore's house, bewildered and frightened. She wrote about the contract she had signed with an ex because she could not yet read, the contract that promised her freedom at 18. She wrote about the endless days of scrubbing floors and washing clothes and serving meals, about the way Whitmore's wife had looked through her as if she were invisible, about the way Whitmore himself had smiled his cold smile whenever she asked about her contract. She wrote about turning 18 and being told she still owed them for her education, though no one had educated her in anything. About turning 19 and being told she owed them for her food and lodging. About turning 20 and realizing that they would never let her go, that she would die in that house if she did not run. She wrote about the night she escaped, about the terror and the exhilaration of that first taste of freedom, about the journey to Redemption Creek and the fragile new life she had built here. When she finally set down her pen, her hand was cramping and her eyes were burning with unshed tears, but she felt lighter somehow. She had put it all down on paper, all the years of servitude and fear and determination. Now it was real. Now it could be used as evidence. She slept better that night than she had in days. Cole arrived the next morning as promised, and they spent several hours going over her statement, adding details and clarifying dates. He was patient and thorough, asking questions that helped her remember things she had forgotten, never rushing her even when the memories clearly pained her. "This is good," he said finally, reading through the pages she had written. "This is very good. You have got specific dates and incidents, and it is all consistent. That matters to judges." "Do you really think it will be enough?" she asked. He looked up from the papers, meeting her eyes directly. "I think you have been through hell and come out the other side still fighting. I think you are stronger than you know. And I think any judge worth his salt will see the truth in what you have written here." Something in the way he looked at her made her breath catch. There was admiration in his gaze, and something else, something warmer that made her pulse quicken. "Why did you really help me?" she asked quietly. "That first day. You said it was because of your mother, but there is more to it than that, is there not?" Cole was silent for a long moment, and she thought perhaps she had overstepped. But then he said, "I looked at you standing there on that porch, terrified but refusing to back down, and I thought I had never seen anyone braver. I thought that if someone like you, who had been through what you had been through, could still stand up and say no to a man like Whitmore, then that was something worth protecting, something worth fighting for." Her heart was hammering now, and she could not look away from his eyes. "I was not brave. I was terrified." "Being brave does not mean not being scared," he said. "It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. You did that. You are still doing it." The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. Then Cole seemed to shake himself, looking back down at the papers in his hands. "We should get these to the judge as soon as he arrives," he said, his voice slightly rough. "And we need to make sure we have those character references ready." Eliza nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She told herself sternly that this was not the time for foolish romantic notions. She was fighting for her freedom, for her very life. She could not afford to be distracted by a handsome cowboy with kind eyes and a hero's heart. But, oh, it was hard not to be distracted. Judge Hawkins arrived in Redemption Creek on a hot afternoon when the sun seemed determined to bake the entire territory into submission. He was a weathered man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that made Eliza nervous despite Cole's reassurances. They met in the back room of the general store, which Mr. Patterson had graciously offered for their use. Eliza sat at the table with Cole beside her, acutely aware of his solid presence, while the judge read through her statement. The silence stretched out, broken only by the rustle of paper and the distant sounds of the street outside. Finally, Judge Hawkins set down the pages and looked at her directly. "This is a serious accusation you are making, Miss Thornton," he said. "You are claiming that Randolph Whitmore kept you in illegal servitude for 6 years past your contract." "Yes, sir," she said, keeping her voice steady with effort. "And you have no copy of the original contract?" "No, sir, I never saw it after I signed it. I could not read at the time, so I did not know exactly what it said, but I was told clearly that I would serve until I was 18, and then I would be free." "Who told you this?" "The man from the orphanage who arranged the placement, Mr. Hargrove, and Mrs. Whitmore when I first arrived. She told me I would be with them for 6 years and then I could make my own way in the world." The judge made a note. "And you have witnesses who can speak to your character here in Redemption Creek?" "Yes, sir." Cole pushed forward the letters that Mrs. Henshaw, Mr. Patterson, and Mrs. Brennan had written. "These folks have known Miss Thornton for the past 4 months and can testify that she has been an upstanding member of this community." Judge Hawkins read through the letters, his expression giving nothing away. Then he sat back in his chair and fixed Eliza with a penetrating stare. "Why did you wait so long to leave?" he asked. "If you knew your contract had expired, why did you stay for 6 additional years?" It was the question she had been dreading, the one that made her feel ashamed even though she knew she had nothing to be ashamed of. "I was afraid," she said simply. "Mr. Whitmore was a powerful man in San Francisco. He had connections, money, influence. When I asked about my contract, he made it clear that if I tried to leave, he would have me arrested for breach of contract and theft. He said I would be put in prison and that no one would believe a servant girl over a respected gentleman. I believed him, and by the time I realized he was likely lying, 6 years had passed, and I felt like I had already lost so much. But I could not take it anymore. I could not spend the rest of my life in that house, watching my youth slip away while he kept finding new reasons to extend my servitude. So you stole $20 and ran? Yes, sir. I am not proud of the theft, but I had no money of my own, and I needed funds to travel. I considered it partial payment for the wages I should have been earning once my contract expired. A creative interpretation, the judge said dryly. Then, to her surprise, his stern expression softened slightly, but not an unreasonable one, given the circumstances you describe. However, we have a problem. Until Mr. Whitmore returns with his documentation, this is just your word against his, and while your statement is compelling and your character witnesses speak highly of you, the law requires evidence. What kind of evidence? Cole asked. Ideally, a copy of the original contract showing the terms of her servitude. Failing that, testimony from others who were present when the contract was made or who witnessed Whitmore extending her service illegally. Without something concrete to refute whatever papers Whitmore brings, I am limited in what I can do. Eliza felt her hope crumbling. So he can just take me back? Not necessarily, Judge Hawkins said. If he cannot prove his claim to your service, then he has no legal right to take you anywhere. But if he has documents that appear legitimate, even forged ones, it becomes more complicated. The burden would be on you to prove the documents are false, which is difficult without evidence of your own. This is wrong, Cole said, his voice tight with frustration. She is clearly telling the truth. Anyone with eyes can see that. I happen to agree with you, Mr. Bennett, the judge said, but I cannot make rulings based on what I feel is right. I need evidence. The law, for all its flaws, requires proof. They sat in defeated silence for a moment. Then Eliza said slowly, What if we could find Mr. Hargrove, the man from the orphanage who placed me with the Whitmores? He would remember the terms of the contract. Do you know where he is? The judge asked. No. He was in San Francisco at the time, working for the Benevolent Society for Orphan Children, but that was 12 years ago. I can send telegrams, Cole said immediately. Try to track him down. It is worth a shot. Judge Hawkins nodded. Do that. In the meantime, I'm going to stay in town for a few days and see if this Whitmore fellow shows up. I want to take a look at whatever papers he brings and question him myself. If there is anything irregular about his documentation, I will find it. Thank you, sir, Eliza said. I appreciate you taking the time to hear my case. I am a judge, Miss Thornton. Hearing cases is what I do, and I have particular disdain for men who abuse the indenture system to essentially enslave vulnerable people. If Whitmore has done what you claim, I will take great pleasure in telling him exactly what I think of his actions, Yara. He stood, gathering his papers. Mr. Bennett, send those telegrams. Miss Thornton, continue going about your business as normally as possible. Try not to worry too much. We will get to the bottom of this. After the judge left, Eliza and Cole remained sitting at the table. She felt exhausted, wrung out from recounting her story and facing the judge's questions. Cole reached over and covered her hand with his, the gesture gentle and comforting. We will find Hargrove, he said firmly. And even if we cannot, the judge is on our side. Did you hear what he said? He has disdain for men like Whitmore. That is in your favor. But without evidence, he cannot help me, Eliza said. And I do not have evidence. I have nothing but my word. Your word is worth more than all of Whitmore's fancy papers, Cole said. I would stake my life on that. She looked down at his hand covering hers, at the calluses and scars that spoke of hard work and honest labor. Then she looked up at his face, at the determination in his eyes, and felt something inside her shift and settle. Why are you doing this? She asked again, needing to hear the answer. Because you deserve to be free, he said simply. Because you deserve to live your life on your own terms without fear. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for." Her breath caught. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know you are brave and strong and determined. I know you have a kind heart despite everything you have been through. I know that when you smile, which is not nearly often enough, it feels like the sun coming out from behind clouds." He paused, then added quietly, "And I know that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day I first saw you on that porch." The world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them, sitting in this small back room with his hand warm over hers. Eliza's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "I have been thinking about you too," she admitted, the words barely above a whisper. Something blazed in his eyes, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. But instead he squeezed her hand gently and said, "Then let us make sure you stay free, so you have the chance to think about me some more." Despite everything, she laughed. It felt good to laugh, like exercising a muscle that had been too long unused. "You are remarkably confident, Mr. Bennet. When I see something I want, I do not believe in holding back," he said. Then he stood, though he seemed reluctant to release her hand. "I am going to go send those telegrams. Will you be all right here?" "Yes, Mrs. Henshaw will be expecting me back upstairs. I have a dress to finish for Mrs. Patterson." "Then I will see you tomorrow, and Eliza?" He waited until she looked up at him. "Whatever happens, we will face it together. You are not alone anymore." After he left, Eliza sat for a few moments trying to collect herself. Her emotions were a tangled mess of fear and hope and something else, something warm and terrifying that she was afraid to name. She had learned long ago not to let herself want things, not to let herself dream of a future beyond survival. But Cole Bennet was making her want things again, making her dream of possibilities she had thought were forever beyond her reach. She pushed herself to her feet and headed back to the milliner's shop, determined to lose herself in the familiar rhythm of needle and thread. But even as she worked, a part of her mind was elsewhere, replaying the feeling of Cole's hand over hers, the look in his eyes when he said she was worth fighting for. 2 more days passed. Cole sent telegrams to every orphanage and benevolent society in San Francisco searching for any trace of Mr. Hargrove. The responses trickled back slowly, and none of them were helpful. The Benevolent Society for Orphan Children had dissolved 5 years ago, Mr. Hargrove, if anyone remembered him at all, had moved away, possibly to the East Coast. It was a dead end. Eliza tried not to let despair overtake her, but it was a constant battle. She went through the motions of her days, sewing and eating and sleeping, but always with a sense of waiting, of a sword hanging over her head by the thinnest of threads. Cole was a constant presence, checking on her daily, bringing her small bits of news, or just sitting with her in companionable silence. His steady support was the only thing keeping her from falling apart entirely, and somewhere in those quiet moments together, something shifted between them. It was in the way he looked at her, as if she were something precious, in the way she found herself watching for him, her heart lifting whenever she saw him approaching, in the way their conversations grew deeper, more personal, sharing pieces of themselves they rarely showed others. He told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, watching his mother work herself to death for people who cared nothing for her, about leaving as soon as he was old enough to make his own way, drifting west until he found work at the Triple Bar, about learning to be a cowboy, to read the land and the cattle, to find satisfaction in hard work under an open sky. She told him about her childhood in the orphanage, the loneliness and the hunger, both physical and emotional, about her dreams of having a real home someday, a place where she belonged, about the books she had taught herself to read, stealing moments with whatever volume she could find, losing herself in stories of far-off places and impossible adventures. "You should have more than stories," Cole said one evening as they sat on the porch of the milliner's shop, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of crimson and gold. "You should have adventures of your own." "I have had quite enough adventure for one lifetime," Eliza said dryly. "I mean the good kind," he said. "The kind you choose for yourself. Seeing new places because you want to, not because you are running. Building something that is yours. That sounds like a dream, she said softly. Dreams can come true. He was looking at her intently. If you are willing to fight for them. I am fighting now, she pointed out, or trying to. I know. And when this is over, when you are truly free with no shadows hanging over you, what will you do then? It was a question she had not let herself consider, too afraid to hope that far ahead. But sitting here with Cole, with the desert stretching out before them endless and beautiful, she found herself actually thinking about it. I would like to keep sewing, she said slowly. But for myself, building my own business, maybe eventually have a real dress shop, creating beautiful things for women who appreciate them. And I would like a home, a real home, not just a rented room. Something small but mine. That sounds like a fine dream, Cole said. What else? She glanced at him and felt her cheeks warm. I suppose I would like to not be alone anymore. To have people in my life who matter, who I matter to. You already have that, he said quietly. You matter to me. Her heart stuttered. Cole. I know the timing is terrible, he said, turning to face her fully. I know you are dealing with Whitmore and the threat of being taken back, and that is what we need to focus on right now, but I need you to know how I feel. From the moment I saw you standing up to that bastard, refusing to back down even though you were scared out of your mind, I was gone. I have never felt like this about anyone. Eliza. And whatever happens, whatever it takes, I am going to make sure you are free. Not just because it is the right thing to do, but because I want to see you build that life you are dreaming about. And if you will let me, I would very much like to be part of it. Tears were sliding down her cheeks before she could stop them. You cannot mean that. You hardly know me. I know enough, he said, echoing his words from days before. I know you are exactly the kind of person I want to spend my life knowing better. What if Whitmore takes me back? The fear that had been lurking beneath every moment broke free. What if the judge cannot help me and I have to go back to San Francisco? Then I will come with you, Cole said firmly. I will find a way to get you free again. I will fight every legal battle, call in every favor, raise hell until something breaks in your favor. You are not getting rid of me. Eliza? Not now. She let out a shaky laugh through her tears. You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Probably both. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumb. But I mean every word. She leaned into his touch without thinking, and his hand curved to cup her face. The moment hung between them, charged and fragile, and then Eliza made a decision. She had spent so many years being afraid, denying herself any chance at happiness because she was too busy surviving. But sitting here with this good man who had appeared in her life like a miracle, she found she was tired of being afraid, tired of denying herself the things she wanted. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, he froze, surprised. Then his hand slid into her hair, and he kissed her back with a tenderness that made her ache. It was not a passionate kiss, not desperate or demanding. It was gentle and careful, a promise, more than a claim. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. I am probably going to regret that, Eliza whispered. Why? Cole asked, his forehead resting against hers. Because if I lose you too, after losing everything else, I do not think I will survive it. You will not lose me. His voice was fierce. I promise you, Eliza, you will not lose me. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it hurt. So she chose, in that moment, to let herself hope, to let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this time things would work out. They sat together as the sun finished setting, his arm around her shoulders and her head resting against his chest. And for a little while, Eliza let herself forget about Whitmore and judges and legal papers. For a little while, she just let herself feel safe. Randolph Whitmore returned to Redemption Creek 6 days after his initial confrontation with Cole. He arrived in a hired carriage this time, accompanied by a hard-faced man wearing a deputy's badge and carrying what appeared to be an official-looking leather portfolio. Word spread quickly through the small town, and by the time the carriage pulled up in front of the general store, a small crowd had gathered. Eliza, who had been in the milliner's shop when she heard the news, felt her stomach drop. Cole was at the Triple Bar Ranch dealing with some emergency involving a fence break and wandering cattle. Judge Hawkins was in town, thank God, but the sight of that deputy badge filled her with dread. Maybe Whitmore really did have the law on his side. Maybe all of this had been for nothing. She forced herself to leave the shop and walk toward the general store, refusing to hide. If this was going to happen, she would face it head on. Whitmore saw her immediately, and that cold smile spread across his face. "There you are, Eliza. Running out of places to hide, are you?" "I am not hiding," she said, pleased that her voice was steady. "I live here." "Not for much longer." He gestured to the man beside him. "This is Deputy Marshal Crawford from Tucson. I have brought the documentation proving my legal claim to your service, and the deputy is here to ensure that you come back to San Francisco peacefully to face theft charges." The deputy stepped forward, pulling papers from the portfolio. "Miss Eliza Thornton, I have a warrant here for your arrest on charges of theft and breach of contract. You need to come with me." "I would like to see those papers." Everyone turned to see Judge Hawkins approaching from the direction of the boarding house where he had been staying. He walked with the authority of a man used to being obeyed, and even the deputy seemed to straighten slightly under his gaze. "Judge Hawkins is," the deputy said, recognition in his voice. "I did not know you were in town." "I am looking into this very matter," the judge said, "so I would be very interested in seeing the documentation Mr. Whitmore has brought." Whitmore's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Of course, Your Honor. I have nothing to hide. Everything is completely legal and above board." He produced a sheaf of papers from the portfolio and handed them to the judge. Eliza watched, her heart in her throat, as Judge Hawkins examined each page carefully. The silence stretched out unbearably. Finally, the judge looked up. "Mr. Whitmore, this contract states that Miss Thornton was indentured to you until her 21st birthday, not her 18th. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. The initial term was 7 years, as is standard for most indenture contracts. And yet Miss Thornton claims she was told the term was 6 years, until age 18. With all due respect, she was a child when the contract was made. Perhaps she misunderstood or misremembered. Perhaps." The judge flipped to another page. "And these additional amendments extending her service further, they were all agreed to by Miss Thornton?" "She was made aware of the debts she was accruing, yes." "But did she sign these amendments? Did she give her explicit consent to the extensions?" Whitmore shifted slightly. "She was living in my house, eating my food, wearing clothes I provided. Her continued residence constituted acceptance of the terms." "That is an interesting interpretation of contract law," Judge Hawkins said dryly. "Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, did you pay Miss Thornton any wages during her time in your service?" "Indentured servants are not paid wages. Their service is their payment for the benefits they receive." "During the initial contract period, perhaps. But after the contract expired, whether at 18 or 21, she became a free woman. Any work performed after that point would require compensation unless she explicitly agreed to further terms of indenture." "She did agree," Whitmore said, but there was tension in his voice now. "Through her continued acceptance of room and board." "I do not see any documentation of such an agreement," the judge said. "No signed amendments, no witnessed statements. Just your word that she agreed to keep working for you indefinitely without wages. Are you suggesting I am lying, Your Honor?" "I am suggesting that your documentation is insufficient to support your claims of ongoing legal indenture." Judge Hawkins turned to the deputy. "Marshal Crawford, this warrant is based on charges of breach of contract and theft. However, if there is no valid contract that was breached, then the charges are unfounded." But, Your Honor, Whitmore protested, I have shown you the original contract. You have shown me a contract that expired by your own admission when Miss Thornton turned 21. She is now 24. Whatever service she provided during those 3 additional years would have been as a free woman, which means she should have been receiving wages. Did you pay her wages, Mr. Whitmore? I provided room and board. That is not the same as wages, and you know it. Furthermore, you claim she stole $20 from you. Given that she worked for 3 years past her contract without compensation, I would argue that she was owed considerably more than $20 in back wages. Taking that money could be construed as collecting a debt owed, not theft. Whitmore's face had gone red. This is outrageous. I came here with proper legal documentation and a federal deputy marshal, and you are twisting the law to protect a runaway servant and a thief. I am interpreting the law as it is written, Judge Hawkins said coldly, and what I see here is a man who exploited a young woman's ignorance and vulnerability to extract years of unpaid labor from her. The indenture system exists to give people opportunities, not to create a permanent underclass of servants. You have violated both the letter and the spirit of those laws. I want a second opinion, Usty, Whitmore demanded. I want this case heard by a judge in San Francisco. You are welcome to pursue that avenue, Judge Hawkins said, but I am dismissing these charges here and now, and Deputy Crawford will not be taking Miss Thornton anywhere. The deputy looked uncomfortable, but nodded. If you say the charges are unfounded, Your Honor, then I do not have grounds to make an arrest. This is not over, Whitmore said, his voice shaking with rage. I have influence in San Francisco. I will take this to the territorial court. I will make sure everyone knows that you allowed a thief to go free. Do what you feel you must, Judge Hawkins said. But I warn you, Mr. Whitmore, if you continue to pursue this case, I will make it my personal mission to investigate your business practices. I suspect that if I dig deeply enough, I will find that Miss Thornton is not the first person you have kept in illegal servitude, and I will ensure that every newspaper from here to San Francisco knows about it. The threat hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable. Whitmore stared at the judge, his face a mask of fury, but Judge Hawkins met his gaze unflinchingly. Finally, Whitmore grabbed the papers from the judge's hands and stuffed them back into the portfolio. You will regret this, he said, both of you. I doubt it, the judge replied calmly. Whitmore turned and stalked back to his carriage, gesturing sharply for the deputy to follow. Marshal Crawford gave the judge an apologetic shrug and climbed into the vehicle. Moments later, the carriage was pulling away, leaving Redemption Creek in a cloud of dust. Eliza stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, people returning to their business with the satisfied air of having witnessed some good drama. Judge Hawkins approached her, his stern expression softening. Are you all right, Miss Thornton? I think so, she said, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Did you really just send him away? Am I really free? You are always free, the judge said, but yes, legally speaking, you no longer have anything to fear from Randolph Whitmore. He may try to take this further, but I meant what I said. If he pushes, I will push back harder, and he knows it. Men like him are bullies, and bullies tend to back down when someone stands up to them. I do not know how to thank you, Eliza said. Thank me by living a good life, Judge Hawkins replied. Build that dress shop you mentioned in your statement. Make something of yourself. That is all the thanks I need. He tipped his hat to her and walked away, leaving Eliza standing in the dusty street feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Free. She was really, truly free. No more looking over her shoulder. No more nightmares of being dragged back. No more Randolph Whitmore. She needed to find Cole. She needed to tell him. She practically ran to the livery stable where she knew Cole kept his horse when he was in town. The stable hand told her that Cole had returned from the ranch about an hour ago and was probably at the boarding house. She thanked him and hurried through the streets, not caring that people were staring at her undignified haste. She found Cole in front of the boarding house talking to another cowboy from the Triple Bar. When he saw her approaching, his expression shifted immediately to concern. "Eliza? What happened? I heard Whitmore was back." "He is gone," she said breathlessly. "Judge Hawkins sent him away. The charges are dismissed. I am free, Cole. I am really free." For a moment, he just stared at her. Then a grin split his face, and he let out a whoop of joy that made his companion jump. He grabbed Eliza and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed and clung to his shoulders. "I knew it," he said, setting her down but keeping his hands on her waist. "I knew that Judge would see through Whitmore's lies." "He was amazing," Eliza said. "He just tore apart every argument Whitmore made, and he threatened to investigate him if he tried to take it further. You should have seen Whitmore's face." "I wish I had," Cole said. Then he seemed to remember they had an audience. He glanced at the other cowboy, who was watching with undisguised amusement. "Sorry, Jake, this is Eliza. Eliza, this is Jake Colson. He works at the ranch with me." "Pleased to meet you," Jake said, tipping his hat. "And congratulations on your freedom, ma'am. Cole has been driving us all crazy worrying about you." "I have not," Cole protested. "You absolutely have," Jake said cheerfully. "But I cannot say I blame you. If I found a woman worth worrying about, I would do the same." He gave them both a knowing look. "I will leave you two to celebrate. Cole, I will see you back at the ranch tomorrow." After Jake left, Cole and Eliza stood facing each other in the dusty street. The joy of the moment was still bubbling through Eliza, making her feel giddy and light. She was free. After 12 years of servitude and fear, she was finally truly free. "I cannot believe it is really over," she said. "Believe it," Cole said. "You are free, Eliza. Free to go wherever you want, do whatever you want. Free to build that life you dreamed about." "I want to build it here," she said, "in Redemption Creek. This place has been good to me, and besides—" She looked up at him through her lashes, feeling suddenly shy. "There is someone here I would very much like to get to know better." His eyes darkened with emotion. "Is that so?" "That is so," she confirmed. He reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses. "Eliza Thornton, would you do me the honor of letting me court you properly? Dinners and walks and all the normal things people do when they're trying to figure out if they want to spend their lives together?" Her heart was so full she thought it might burst. "I think I already know the answer to that question." "Do you now?" His thumb stroked along her cheekbone. And what answer would that be? Instead of answering with words, she pulled his head down and kissed him, right there in the middle of the street where anyone could see. Let them see. Let the whole world see that she was free and alive and kissing the man she was falling in love with. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to take that as a yes," he said. She laughed, the sound bright and clear in the desert air. "Yes, definitely yes." The next few months unfolded like a dream. Eliza threw herself into her work with renewed energy, building her sewing business and saving every penny she could toward opening her own shop. Cole courted her with a patience and sweetness that made her fall more in love with him every day. They spent their evenings walking along the creek that gave the town its name, talking about everything and nothing. He told her stories about life on the ranch, about the cattle drives and the long nights under the stars. She told him about the books she loved, about the dresses she dreamed of creating, about the life she wanted to build now that she finally could. He introduced her to his friends at the Triple Bar, and she found herself welcomed into a community of cowboys and ranchers who treated her like family. She met his boss, a gruff older man named Henry Walsh, who took one look at the way Cole watched Eliza and declared that it was about time the boy found himself a good woman. In turn, Eliza introduced Cole to Mrs. Henshaw and the other women in town who had become her friends. They approved of him instantly, especially when they saw how gently he treated her, how he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. 3 months after Whitmore's final departure, Cole took Eliza on a picnic to a spot overlooking the desert where the sunset painted the sky in impossible colors. They sat on a blanket, eating cold chicken and fresh bread, talking and laughing as the day slowly faded into evening. "I have been thinking," Cole said as the first stars began to appear. "About what?" Eliza asked, leaning against his shoulder. "About the future, about what comes next." Something in his tone made her sit up and look at him. He was watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "What about the future?" she asked carefully. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he extracted a ring, simple silver with a small turquoise stone that caught the fading light. "I know we have not been courting very long," he said, "and I know you are just starting to figure out who you are now that you are free. But I also know that I love you, Eliza Thornton. I love your strength and your kindness and your determination. I love the way you laugh and the way you look at the world like every day is a gift. I love everything about you, and I cannot imagine spending my life with anyone else." Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "I am not rich," Cole continued. "I am just a cowboy, and I probably always will be. But I am good with my hands, and I work hard, and I promise you I will spend every day trying to make you happy. Will you marry me, Eliza? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me with your heart?" She could barely speak through her tears, but she managed to get the words out. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and the desert stretched out around them, vast and beautiful and full of promise. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Redemption Creek. Mrs. Henshaw cried through the entire ceremony, and Judge Hawkins, who had made a special trip from Tucson to attend, gave the bride away. Half the town turned out to witness Eliza Thornton become Eliza Bennett, and the celebration lasted long into the night. Cole had found them a small house on the edge of town. Just 3 rooms, but with good bones and a yard where Eliza immediately began planting a garden. It was not much, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. The first night in their new home, lying in Cole's arms with her head on his chest and his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Eliza thought about the long journey that had brought her here, the years of servitude and fear, the desperate flight to freedom, the terror of Whitmore finding her, and then the miracle of Cole stepping between them and saying she was free forever. "What are you thinking about?" Cole murmured, his fingers combing gently through her hair. "About how different my life is now," she said. "A year ago, I never would have believed this was possible. Having a home, a husband, a future that belongs to me." "You earned it," he said. "You fought for it." "We fought for it," she corrected. "I would not be here if you had not stood up for me." "I will always stand up for you," he promised. "For the rest of our lives, whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," she echoed, and felt the truth of it settle deep in her bones. She was not alone anymore. She was not running anymore. She was home. The years that followed were not without challenges. The first year of marriage required adjustments as they learned each other's habits and quirks. Cole worked long hours at the ranch, and sometimes he came home exhausted and irritable. Eliza poured herself into building her sewing business, and sometimes she was so focused on her work that she forgot to eat or sleep. But they worked through it, learning to communicate, to compromise, to support each other through the hard times. 2 years after their wedding, Eliza finally opened her dress shop. It was small, just 1 room with a curtained-off area for fittings, but it was hers. Cole built her a beautiful wooden sign that said "Eliza's Fine Dresses" and hung it over the door with pride. Women came from miles around to commission gowns and have their existing clothes altered. Eliza's skill with a needle and her eye for design made her sought after, and slowly but surely, the business grew. 3 years into their marriage, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mix of joy and terror. She had never allowed herself to imagine having children, afraid to hope for that kind of future. But Cole was over the moon, already planning how to expand their small house to make room for a nursery. The pregnancy was difficult. Eliza was sick for months, barely able to keep food down, and there were moments when she was afraid she would lose the baby. But Cole was there through all of it, holding her hair when she was sick, bringing her water and crackers, rubbing her feet when they swelled. Dr. Brennan checked on her regularly, and his calm confidence helped ease some of her fears. Their son was born on a cool October evening in 1880, after 18 hours of labor that left Eliza exhausted but triumphant. Cole held the baby with tears streaming down his face, and when he placed their son in Eliza's arms, she felt a love so fierce and overwhelming that it took her breath away. They named him James, after Cole's father, who had died when Cole was young. James Bennett came into the world with his mother's dark eyes and his father's determined chin. And from the moment he drew his first breath, he owned his parents' hearts completely. Motherhood transformed Eliza in ways she had not expected. She had thought she might struggle with it given her own difficult childhood and lack of maternal role models, but she found that loving James came as naturally as breathing. She marveled at his tiny fingers and toes, sang to him while she nursed, spent hours just watching him sleep. Cole was a devoted father, coming home from the ranch each evening, eager to hold his son, telling the baby stories about the cattle and the horses as if James could understand every word. When James was 6 months old, Eliza hired a young woman named Sarah to help in the shop so she could spend more time with her son. Sarah was 16 and eager to learn the sewing trade, and she proved to be a quick study. With Sarah handling the simpler alterations, Eliza was able to take on more complex commissions while still having time for her family. The years passed, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. James grew from a baby to a toddler to a bright, curious boy who loved following his father around the ranch. When he was 4, Eliza gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace, who looked so much alike that even their parents had trouble telling them apart at first. The girls were followed 2 years later by another boy, Thomas, who was quiet and serious, where his older brother was boisterous. Their small house had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing family. Cole had proven to be skilled at carpentry, adding rooms with his own hands, building furniture, creating a home that was warm and welcoming. Eliza's dress shop had moved to a larger location on Main Street, and she now employed 3 seamstresses in addition to Sarah, who had become her assistant manager. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable. They had enough to feed and clothe their children, to set aside a little savings for emergencies, to occasionally splurge on small luxuries like store-bought candy or a new book. It was more than Eliza had ever dreamed of having. Judge Hawkins visited occasionally, usually staying for dinner, and spending hours playing with the children, who adored him. He brought news from the wider world, tales of cases he had heard and injustices he had corrected. He had become something of a crusader against the abuse of the indenture system, and he told them proudly that several men who had been exploiting servants had been brought to justice. "You started all of this," he told Eliza during one visit. "Your courage in standing up to Whitmore inspired others to come forward with their own stories. You have made a real difference." She had been humbled by that, though she could not quite believe it. She had just been trying to survive, trying to claim the freedom that should have been hers all along. If her actions had helped others, that was a bonus she had never expected. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised her with a trip. He had arranged for the children to stay with Mrs. Henshaw and another family friend, and he took Eliza back to the spot overlooking the desert where he had proposed. They sat on a blanket as the sun set, just as they had a decade earlier, and talked about everything they had built together. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Marrying a cowboy instead of someone who could give you more?" "Never," Eliza said firmly. "You gave me everything that matters. Freedom, love, a family, a life that is mine. What more could I possibly want?" "I just want you to be happy," he said. "I am happy," she assured him. "I am so happy sometimes I'm afraid I'm going to wake up and find it was all a dream." "It is real," Cole said, pulling her close. "We are real. And I love you more now than I did the day we got married." "How is that possible?" she asked. "Because every day with you shows me some new reason to love you, the way you are with our children. the way you have built a business from nothing, the way you still look at the world with wonder despite everything you have been through. You are the strongest person I know, Eliza, and I'm so damn grateful that you chose me." She kissed him then, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into it. When they finally pulled apart, the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "We should get back," she said reluctantly. "The children will want their goodnight kisses." "In a minute," Cole said. "I just want to sit here with you a little longer, just the two of us like it was in the beginning." So they sat, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the night sky emerge above the desert. And Eliza thought about that terrified woman who had stood on the porch of the general store 12 years ago, watching her former owner approach with the certainty that her fragile new life was about to be destroyed. She thought about the cowboy who had stepped between them and changed everything with 6 simple words. "She is free forever." He had been right. She was free, not just legally, though that mattered, but free in her heart and soul. Free to love and be loved, free to build and create and dream, free to live a life that was entirely, beautifully, miraculously her own. The children grew, as children do. James became a teenager, tall and strong like his father, already working part-time at the ranch and declaring his intention to be a cowboy. The twins were 12, different as night and day despite their identical faces. Emma was bold and adventurous, while Grace was gentle and artistic, spending hours helping her mother in the dress shop. Thomas, at 10, was already showing signs of being the scholar of the family, his nose always buried in a book. Eliza's hair had begun to show threads of silver at her temples, and Cole's face was more weathered than it had been, but their love had only deepened with time. They had weathered droughts and illness, financial setbacks and family squabbles. They had buried friends and celebrated new babies. They had watched their town grow from a small settlement to a thriving community with a proper school and a railroad connection. And through it all, they had each other. One evening, when Eliza was 42 and Cole was 45, they sat on the porch of their house watching the sunset. The children were inside, the sounds of their laughter and arguments drifting through the open windows. Cole took Eliza's hand, lacing their fingers together in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not been in town that day?" he asked. "If I had not seen Whitmore trying to take you?" "I try not to," Eliza admitted. "It is too frightening to imagine." "Someone else would have helped you, Cole said. "You would have found a way. You're too strong to have let him take you back." "Maybe," she said, "but I'm glad it was you. I'm glad it was you who stood up for me, you who fought for me, you who loved me. I cannot imagine my life with anyone else." "Neither can I," Cole said. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Eliza Bennett. Then, now, and always." She leaned her head on his shoulder, content in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The girl who had been bought and sold like property was gone. The woman who had lived in constant fear was gone. In their place was someone new, someone free, someone loved, someone who had built a life beyond her wildest dreams. Years continued to pass. James married a rancher's daughter and gave them their first grandchild. Emma shocked everyone by announcing her intention to become a doctor and left to study in San Francisco, the city Eliza had fled from so many years ago. Grace took over the dress shop when Eliza began to slow down, her fingers not as nimble as they once were. Thomas went east to university, his letters full of excitement about his studies in law. Cole retired from the ranch, though he still helped out during busy seasons. They spent their days in comfortable companionship, tending their garden, playing with their growing number of grandchildren, reminiscing about the long, full life they had built together. Eliza never saw or heard from Randolph Whitmore again. Years later, she learned through Judge Hawkins that Whitmore had died in San Francisco, his reputation in tatters after several former servants had come forward with their own stories of abuse and illegal servitude. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet relief that he would never hurt anyone else the way he had hurt her. Judge Hawkins himself passed away when Eliza was 50, and she wept at his funeral as if she had lost a father. He had given her the gift of legal freedom, and she would never forget that debt. Cole held her through her grief, reminding her that the judge had lived a good life and had made a real difference in the world. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration that brought half the town to their home. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears as people shared stories about the couple who had become pillars of the Redemption Creek community. But the moment Eliza treasured most came late in the evening, when she and Cole slipped away from the crowd to stand beneath the stars. Cole pulled her into his arms, and they swayed gently to music only they could hear. 30 years, Eliza murmured. I still remember the day you stepped between me and Whitmore like it was yesterday. The best decision I ever made, Cole said. Well, that and convincing you to marry me. You did not have to work very hard at that, she teased. I would have worked as hard as it took, he said seriously. I would have moved mountains, Eliza. I would have done anything to make you mine. I was already yours, she said. From the moment you said I was free forever. You gave me back myself, and I gave you my heart. It was always that simple. They stood together in the starlight, surrounded by the sounds of their family celebrating inside, and Eliza felt a profound sense of gratitude for the path her life had taken. It had been hard, so much harder than anyone who had not lived it could understand, but it had led her here, to this man, to this family, to this beautiful, messy, miraculous life. She was free, she was loved, she was home, and that was all she had ever needed. Cole grew ill in his 68th year. It started as a cough that would not go away, and gradually worsened until he could barely walk from the house to the barn without stopping to catch his breath. The doctor diagnosed consumption and gave them the news they both dreaded, that there was nothing to be done but make him comfortable. Eliza refused to accept it at first. She tried every remedy she could find, every treatment the doctor suggested, but nothing helped. Cole continued to decline, growing thinner and weaker with each passing week. Their children rallied around them. James took over all the household tasks Cole could no longer perform. The girls visited daily, bringing food and medicine and sitting with their father so Eliza could rest. Thomas took time away from his law practice in Phoenix to be with his family. Through it all, Cole remained stubbornly cheerful, cracking jokes even when his breath came in labored gasps, telling Eliza she was being ridiculous when she fussed over him. I am not being ridiculous, she said, tucking another blanket around him even though the Arizona day was warm. I am taking care of my husband. You have been taking care of me for 33 years, he said. Maybe it is time you let someone take care of you for a change. Absolutely not, she said firmly. We are a team, remember? For better or worse, in sickness and in health. I remember, he said softly, reaching for her hand. I remember every word of those vows, Eliza, and I have meant every one of them every day we have been together. She blinked back tears. You are not allowed to leave me. Not planning on it any time soon, he said, but they both knew it was a lie. They could both feel time running out, precious and finite. Cole lasted another 6 months. He spent his final weeks in the bed they had shared for over 3 decades, surrounded by his family. Eliza rarely left his side, sleeping in a chair next to the bed, holding his hand through the long nights. On a clear spring morning, with the desert blooming outside their window and his wife holding his hand, Cole Bennett took his last breath. He went peacefully, slipping away as the sun rose over the red rocks he had loved his entire life. Eliza felt like a part of her soul had been torn away. The grief was a physical thing, a weight in her chest that made it hard to breathe. But she forced herself to keep going, arranging the funeral, accepting condolences, being strong for her children and grandchildren. They buried Cole in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Redemption Creek. The entire town turned out for the funeral, testament to the respect and affection they had held for the cowboy who had spent his life doing right by people. In the days after the funeral, Eliza found herself drawn to the places she and Cole had shared. She walked to the creek where they had spent so many evenings talking. She sat on the porch where he had proposed. She visited the spot overlooking the desert where they had celebrated their 10th anniversary. And slowly, through the grief, she began to find a kind of peace. She had lost the love of her life, and the pain of that would never fully go away. But she had also been blessed with 33 years of marriage to a good man who had loved her with his whole heart. She had children and grandchildren who carried Cole's legacy forward. She had a lifetime of beautiful memories that no one could take from her. She lived for another 12 years after Cole's death, watching her grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren into the world. She continued to work in the dress shop occasionally, though Grace had taken over the business entirely. She remained active in the community, known for her kindness and her willingness to help anyone in need. On a warm evening in late summer when Eliza was 77 years old, she died peacefully in her sleep. Her children found her the next morning, still and serene, with a slight smile on her face, as if she had been dreaming something pleasant. They buried her next to Cole on the hill overlooking Redemption Creek, and the town turned out once again to pay their respects to a woman who had overcome so much and built such a full life. If anyone had told the frightened 24-year-old woman standing on that porch so many years ago that her story would end like this, surrounded by love and family and community, she would never have believed them. But the cowboy who had stepped between her and her former owner had been right. She was free forever, free to live, free to love, free to build a legacy that would endure long after she was gone. And in the end, that was everything.